With 5 days until the midterm elections, candidates around the country are making their final pitches to voters, the ones who haven't voted already early. Among those hitting the trail for Republicans, GOP Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, who's been campaigning with Dr. Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania and Herschel Walker in Georgia, J.D. Vance in Ohio. Senator Cotton also has a brand new book out called Only the Strong, Reversing the Left's Plot to Sabotage American Power, where he gives his take on how Democratic presidents, all the way back to Woodrow Wilson, have been steering the country down the wrong path when it comes to military and foreign policy issues. He writes, for example, quote, America's recent decline isn't an accident. It's declined by design. For more than a century, liberal Democrats have plotted to sabotage American power. These Democrats believe a strong, confident America brings war, arrogance, and oppression, not safety, freedom, and prosperity. And Senator Cotton joins us now here in studio. Thank you so much for being here. Good to have you here. Thanks, it's a pointed book. It's a very is that fair to say, you think? It's a pointed book? I mean,
I had a lot to get off my chest.
It's very sharp criticism about Democrats. And I knew you were very conservative. I don't think I knew fully or realized fully how, is contempt an okay word to use? How much contempt you had for these policies? And I wonder, does it make it difficult to work with Senate Democrats, given how strongly you feel that they stand for all these wrong things?
No, not at all. I mean, look, you got to deal with senators every day. One day a senator's going to be your adversary, the next day they're going to be your ally. That's not an issue. But yeah, I mean, going back 100 years to Woodrow Wilson, as I outlined in Only the Strong, he was the first president to openly repudiate the Declaration and the Constitution. At home, that meant that he and the progressives wanted to create this vast administrative state of unelected bureaucrats trying to set the course for our country.
Segregated, too. He was a horrible racist.
Well, he was a virulent racist as well.
But I'm just saying, didn't he resegregate the government?
He did, but you know, the left can take his name off the buildings because of that, but they can't take his ideas out of their movement. And you still see that today domestically, but you see it abroad as well. Like when he when he declared war on Germany shortly after his re-election, it wasn't for any of the many good reasons to declare war on Germany that the founding fathers would have cited, like Germany conspiring with Mexico to seize territory in our southwest, or killing Americans by sinking the Lusitania, or interrupting our economy here in America because of unrestricted submarine warfare. It was on behalf of abstract ideals. And he famously said that we're going to make the world safe for democracy. And I would suggest there's one word missing from that, and I think our founders would have suggested there's a word missing from that as well.
American?
We should make the world safe for America's democracy.
America's democracy. So it's a lot of pointed criticisms of Democratic presidents dating back to Wilson all the way through to today to President Biden. Just FDR and Truman were president during the Allies' victory in World War II. Sure. Obama okayed the mission to go kill Osama bin Laden. You cite that to criticize Biden for not agreeing with him, but you don't really give Obama the credit. I mean, there are some things Democratic presidents have done.
They don't get everything wrong, obviously. And the older presidents in the 20th century are better than the more recent ones, especially the post-Vietnam Democratic presidents. But even with FDR and Truman, they cut the defense budget badly. I mean, our army was smaller than Portugal's army before World War II.
Well, then they cranked it back up.
Same thing before the Korean War. I mean, we deployed our troops into the Korean War woefully unprepared and undertrained. But really starting with JFK, and it's a misnomer to think that JFK was a strong president. He was a disaster as a foreign policy president. But then especially after Vietnam, when the left turned not just on America's founding, but on America itself, then you begin to see a steady erosion of American power throughout Democratic presidencies of Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, and especially Barack Obama.
So one thing that I was interested, since you bring up Vietnam, I was interested to read your criticism of the New York Times for publishing the Pentagon Papers, which were leaked to the Times by Daniel Ellsberg, who thought that the war wasn't winnable and that the leaders were hiding this from the public, and the public had a right to know. He first tried to bring it to members of Congress. They didn't want to do it, so then he went to the press. But here's the thing. You're also so critical, and I'm not saying you're wrong, of JFK and LBJ and how they waged the war in Vietnam. What's wrong with the New York Times bringing the failures of these Democratic administrations, two of them, to the public so they could see what was really going on? You're a veteran. You know how many Americans died in Vietnam when the generals didn't think the war was winnable, but they didn't have the guts to tell the commander-in-chief or to tell the country.
Well, it's just another example of the New York Times putting itself in the position of judging what classified information should and should not be revealed, which is not its position. You know, the
Supreme Court sided with them.
But the New York, well, they said that the New York Times couldn't be subjected to a prior restraint. They said that you could have consequences after the fact.
Didn't the public have a right to know of all these failures you criticized?
Well, about the Pentagon Papers itself, I would say there wasn't a lot of new revelations there. A lot of it was already well known to the public, and it didn't show that the war was unwinnable, because once Richard Nixon became president and he took the handcuffs off of our military, we in effect had the war won by 1973. We had stabilized the situation. The Viet Cong had been destroyed as a fighting force. Ho Chi Minh's army had no longer gained purchase in the South.
Yeah.
It was only when he was weakened by Watergate, Democratic Congresses began to cut funding, including a very young Senator Joe Biden, that we had the absolute disaster in South Vietnam when we had helicopters lifting off our embassy there in 1975.
Well, on that subject, you compared that to the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan under the Biden administration. I want to share with you something that fellow veteran Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger tweeted. He said, "I blame both Trump for this moment coming and Biden for this botched ending. I'm not picking sides because both sides have failed you. It's the truth about Afghanistan." Do you hold President Trump accountable at all for that peace treaty that he and Secretary Pompeo negotiated with the Taliban, which Biden inherited? And you might remember Trump wanted to have the Taliban leaders come to Camp David right near the anniversary of 9/11.
No, it's President Biden who's responsible for what happened last year in Afghanistan. As I write in Only the Strong, that agreement was not without flaw, but it was based on conditions on the ground, which the Taliban was not meeting in 2021. I think a lot of what happened in 2021 is that Joe Biden had a chip on his shoulder going back to 2009 that Barack Obama had sided with military advisors like Stan McChrystal and Dave Petraeus and added troops to Afghanistan in 2009.
Bob Gates, the secretary.
And Bob Gates and Hillary Clinton and everyone else. And
Yeah.
Joe Biden was the one person in 2009 who kept kind of poisoning the well between President Obama and his senior military leaders, saying, you got to get out, you can't do this.
He thought the generals
And
were
he wanted
jamming
to-
him, yeah.
And he wanted to prove that he was right. And we had numerous instances of testimony after the collapse in Afghanistan last year of Secretary Austin and General Milley and General McKenzie and others saying that their best advice is that we keep a small contingent in Afghanistan, that we keep civilian contractors there to keep the Afghan Air Force flying so they can provide air cover for the Afghan troops. Even most of the advisors, my understanding is, in the White House and the State Department, advised Joe Biden against this course of action.
Right. But you don't hold Trump responsible for that. You say it's a flawed treaty.
I think in the end, it was Joe Biden's decision as the
Okay.
commander-in-chief last year.
So, first of all, this underlines why you should be coming on CNN more so that we can have these conversations, because it's good for people to hear from you, not just on Fox or in Arkansas. I know you're not going to announce on my show that you're running for president in 2024, but two quick questions. Does Trump's decision as to whether or not he's going to run, will that play any role in whether or not you decide to run? And do you think you'd make a good president? Those are, come on.
I'll just say two things. First, we have an election 5 days from now.
Sure.
And that's where my focus is. There'll be time after that election to think about the 2024 election. But anyone who thinks they can be president and wants to run for president should check out a copy of Only the Strong so they can learn how to restore American power, Joe.
All right, your publisher is going to be very happy with that. I'm interested to see what your Amazon rank is. Please come back. It's good to see you, Senator, but best to your wife and your boys.